get
We are
to
Women
it.
in Games International. Our mission, cultivate resources to advance economic equality and diversity in the global games industry. Through knowledge sharing, access to technology, and actionable mentorship, WIGI champions change on a global scale. WIGI provides workshops, boot camps, mentorship programs, and networking events designed to eliminate barriers and normalize women, non-binary, and femme-identifying professionals in the global games industry. We are proud to offer all programs, resources, and events entirely free of charge for everyone. WIGI is empowering the next generation of games industry leaders. Together, we can reshape the industry to be stronger, more diverse, and open to everyone. Visit getwigi.com to learn more. Sign up for our WIGI weekly newsletter or follow us on social media to keep up to date with our ongoing programs and initiatives. Please join or donate today.
Little technical difficulties there. I apologize, you all. Now you can actually hear me instead of just seeing me talk. And now it's time to start the next panel. Jihan kicked it off, an amazing opening panel. And now it's time to get to the second one. Representation matters. Seeing yourself as the hero. This is, of course, sponsored by Women in Games International. A little bit about the panel before we get to know some of the lovely panelists that we have here today. Representation matters. Of course it does. This is what this whole event is all about, right? The heroes we see as children play a huge role in answering the questions, who do you want to be when you grow up? So, who do young girl gamers have to look up to? What does gaming say women can be? From Laura Croft to Peach, we look at how women are portrayed in the gaming world and discuss how we can create more diverse digital heroes in this space. We have a lovely set of panelists for this evening. We have Kate Edwards, CEO and principal consultant of Geography. We have Dana Edmonds, founder of Aspiring Co. Catherine Cottle, aka Kate Cottle, I apologize, chair of liberal studies and literature at William U. And of course, last but not least, Jalari Latigua, CEO and founder of Stream Technologies. We are going to throw it to you all to start this off. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional journey, and what led you to the place that you are now. We can, yeah. Hey there, Kate.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to start if you wish.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Yeah, I'm going to have to keep mine as short as possible just because it's a very convoluted story. But the short story, just so you know what I do, I'm a geographer who's been working in video games for over 28 years. So I do culturalization work in which I help game developers navigate the complexities of representation of culture, religion, politics, all these issues that can get them into a lot of trouble and complicated release in different markets around the world. And so I've been doing that a very long time. I spent 13 years at Microsoft where I started this work, where I created a new kind of team to do this kind of work at Microsoft, which led me to work on most of the franchises you probably know from there, like Halo and Fable and Age of Empires and all that good stuff. And then when I left in 2005, I became a consultant, and I've been doing that work ever since for a lot of other companies you probably know, like EA and Ubisoft and BioWare and all kinds of others. I've also spent a lot of time, especially the last 10 years or so, focused on advocacy work in the game industry. So I've spent time running the International Game Developers Association, and I just recently stepped down from being the executive director of the Global Game Jam, which is the world's largest game creation event. As far as my journey, that's the part I'm going to keep really short. So basically, short story, I was 4 years old when the US landed on the moon. I remember watching it on TV because yes, I'm that old. And it really inspired me. So I wanted to be an astronaut. And so that was really my aspiration early on. And when I went out of high school, I did aerospace engineering for 1 year because I found out I'm too right-brained for calculus. It's that simple. I've always had artistic skill though, so I went into industrial design because I wanted to be a conceptual artist for Lucasfilm because I love Star Wars and all things geekness, and I really wanted to do the conceptual art. So I perfected that for a couple of years, but then I just on a whim decided, you know what, I love maps, I love travel, I love studying culture. I'm going to switch to geography, and the rest is history. And so basically that was my path, and I took those artistic skills to cartography, and but when I did my master's thesis in my graduate work, I focused on using VR for cartography. This was way back in 1991 when VR hardly even worked. So, but that, and it was shortly after that where I made my way into Microsoft quite by accident. And yeah, so that's basically my strange career path.
All right, looks.
I can go next. Yes. Okay. So if this is okay, I can go next. Hi guys, I'm Janae Edmonds. I'm the founder of Aspire & Co., which is a media company that I started back in like 2014-ish. Really, it was because I didn't know what creative careers looks like for women and women of color. And I've since expanding that to include non-binary folks too, because I feel like there's tons of areas in which, representation is lacking in that way. So I have expanded to include those folks also. And what we do is we interview what we call dream chasers, and we share their stories on our website so people can get a feel for like how they got started and like how they can support them now and like what kind of ongoing work they're doing. So that's my background. I've been doing that for I've been doing it, I guess, probably for like 12 years total. But through Aspire & Co. Will be, I think, like 8 this year? Yeah, 8 or 9. Sweet.
All right.
I'll go next. My name is Kate Cottle. I'm the chair of liberal studies and literature at Wilmington University. Like Andrea said, my professional background is mostly in teaching writing, but one of the big things I like to do is how can I use technology to help people learn better, to help people get better access. One of the things that I like to do is get rid of textbooks and make sure that we're using open educational resources, because I really feel strongly like it's part of social justice. Sometimes people can just afford the class, let alone the textbook that cost a third of the class. Anyway, so I was originally a lit kid, and most of my narratives, cultural narratives from books, but the world has changed, right? Most people don't get their cultural narratives from books anymore. They're getting them from video games. They're getting them from other kinds of media. And so the thing that I'm really interested in is, so here are the stories that are getting heard. Well, what about all these other stories that aren't getting heard? And we focus on a very specific kind of protagonist for the most part. And so anything that is an outlier of that is considered, like a Mary Sue or whatever. And I want to have conversations with people about why all the stories need to be heard and how, I'm not saying this right, but like we need to be culturally responsive, and part of that is hearing people's truths.
Yes. Awesome. And you said a lot of things that lead on to other questions, but we're going to kick it to Jallery to end the little getting to know each other part.
Hi, my name is Jallery Lantigua. First, I'd like to start in the great pleasure in being on this event and meeting all of these amazing women that have taken a step up and represent women in technology and gaming industry. I'm a speech language therapist and a robotics instructor, game development, really techie, having like this empowerment of pursuing and making my own company, Stream Technologies. And we are a focused bilingual technology center. We are accessible for children with neurodiversity, typical, and students that are gifted. We really focus on stream education and their well-being as well. One of our most popular courses is obviously game development. So we teach kids how to code, learn the science behind the game, and actually get into it and having these skills that will pursue them to have better jobs and access. So that is one of my strong points. Also being very inclusive in our environment. We want children, students, adults, and more than anything, people that no matter their color, race, or wherever they come from, just to pursue, be talented, and actually get into the game. Because sometimes in the past, well, people go out to their streets and play, but the game is online. So we have to go to those communities and understand the technology and the power that it has to actually make some impact. So that's my story.
Right. And I love your story because a lot of you guys' stories, they really harp on all the things that we're going to be talking about a little bit in this panel. But as an extension of an icebreaker, right? This is about representation of women in games. I want to know, is there any particular woman in the gaming world, whether that be in a digital space, and or you can go ahead and say both if you would like, in a physical space that you really looked up to, you really aspire to be, you really enjoy, and you think of them as a representation of like the hero that you would see in the gaming world or gaming space?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly offer a few. I mean, because my path, I didn't, especially just because of the generation I come from, we didn't have like game creation as a career path. It's something you kind of fell backwards into by accident, or you happen to be in the right place at the right time. So I honestly aspired to work in the game industry, even though I've been a gamer my entire life, because I was, I think, 7 years old when Pong showed up. And so for me, that was my first video game experience. And it was just like life-changing for myself and all my friends. And, so I always was a forever lover of games, but never really saw the industry, because at that time, especially when I was in college, the industry is very nascent at that point. But over the years, though, I've gotten a chance to meet many, many amazing women in the industry, like Amy Hennig, Rhianna Pratchett, Bonnie Ross, Kiki Wolfkill. I mean, there's many people. I could go on and on and on with many women. Shannon Loftus as well. Some of the crew that I worked with at Microsoft back in the day, all of them are amazing women. They basically took their positions and really shaped those roles to fit who they are as individuals, and left a very lasting mark on the companies in which they worked. And it's no surprise that they've reached the level of success they have now and the level of notoriety. But it all comes with a sense of humility, and because they're basically just out to do what they feel is the best thing they can do, and to use their abilities to their utmost. And that's really all it is. And so I just love all of these people I work with or have worked with over the years. And to me, they are heroes. And to me, I could see, that kind of person being represented in the game, because especially the type of leadership that they've exhibited is the leadership that I've always aspired to do as well, which is basically the, leadership by service. The best leaders that I've known are leaders who take a servant's attitude.
Anyone else would love to answer that question? And mind you, too, it could be even a video game character that you feel like really represents, hey, this is a pinnacle. I know Laura Croft was that for a lot of people at any space, whether it be, a person at a company or digitally as well. Anyone else? It's absolutely A-okay. It's absolutely fine, because again, we were talking a little bit, and Kate, you talked about it. In fact, you had like a whole TED Talk, right, where you talked a little bit about how you wanted, yours was humanity focused, but you really wanted to like tell stories that bridge the gap, right, and really let you understand a little bit more about backgrounds. And it seems like all of you all have a background in which you care about exposing other backgrounds and really showing that representation matters. So please tell us why backgrounds like yours in particular are backgrounds that you've worked on, like your background in trying to get other people to learn about backgrounds has led, it's necessary not only in the spaces that you reside in, but also in the gaming industry as well.
It's contextualization, right? It's the work that Kate does. It's the work that Danae does to help people realize their dreams, right? It's all about the context. And so I think the thing that's important for my work is when I'm talking to people about literary ideas, about emotional, whatever that they're seeing in these pieces, is also showing them the history that it's coming from and who the person that it's coming from. Just because if we don't have those pieces of information, everything is harder to understand. And I have to be honest about something in video games. Sometimes I do feel like video games lack that contextualization. Like I just looked at an Epic of Gilgamesh video game because I wanted to talk about other heroes. You know, Gilgamesh has an existential crisis after the death of his lover. But the Epic of Gilgamesh game was all, you know, first person, well, sword play. And like, if people don't know the history behind Gilgamesh and why he's so important to world culture and the monomyth and the hero with 1,000 faces, it's just that. And sorry, that's just me. And it's probably exposing my ignorance. But that's something that I would like to see more in video games, is that contextualization that offers the historical perspective.
Yes. Anybody else have insight and why it's important for backgrounds like yours, either particularly or, you know, as working in someone and exposing the backgrounds is important?
Yes, I would love to add to that. I love storytelling and getting to know people personally, or more than anything is a connection. We are human beings, we're social people, and to order to have impact and to do something significant, story, connecting with people and inspiring is a really important asset to this in the game and outside. So for me, video games has a very great big potential, but we need to connect also with the person who is behind that game and to really understand the mission and what is the goal and the objection to envision this, because it's a really powerful industry. It's trending, but some people don't have the best orientation and how to target it and really get benefit impact in humanity. And we need to represent women. Because in technology, we're like under 2%, at least Latinas. So we can use this really big opportunity to really reach out and tell stories about how people are overcoming their obstacle, inspiring others, and doing great impact that can really impact the future long term, not really short near. So that would be my perspective, that there's a lot to do here and we can really use this as our benefit for others.
I have to completely agree with that. I think the importance of context is everything, because people need to see people that look like them going through and really just like talking about their experiences, and really that just helps other people to be able to see themselves in that role. So I think the more that we're able to do that, the more benefit it brings to everyone.
Awesome. So obviously having more people in the space who look like us, are from these backgrounds that we have, obviously shape these perceptions and these things. And let's talk a little bit about how we're talking a little bit about how that shapes things. And Kate, you mentioned, not seeing those people when you were growing up because, that wasn't a thing, but now there's starting to be a little bit more representation. I want a little bit of comparing contracts, right? What is your perception of the current state of gaming, and how does that compare to when you were getting into gaming, when you were understanding gaming, and how far has that progress gone? There's still a lot more left to go. Let's talk about
it. I mean, it's, I know the younger folks in the industry who I love, and I mentor them and work alongside them. They find it hard to believe when I say, well, it's a lot better now than it was 25 years ago. Trust me, it's a lot better now. And they're like, yeah, but it's still not good. And we don't have this, we don't. And I'm like, no, we don't, but it's progress. It is progress. And I think, we have two pieces to it that are, what I think we have to look at differently. One is the piece of the workplace and the representation in the workplace. And that's where we are still struggling as an industry. We've gotten better. I mean, on average, like when I ran the IGDA, we did a survey every year that basically had a assessment of like, what does our representation look like across gender and identity and other dimensions. And generally speaking, roughly speaking, from market to market, at least the markets around the world where games are cheap, are produced, it was anywhere from 15 to 20%, roughly, give or take. I mean, some markets like Eastern Europe, it was a lot less, and others, like in Southeast Asia, it was a lot more. And so we saw that. that part of it. But, I think all of us know, and I think maybe this is probably, we don't have enough time to go into the conversation about, pipeline and talent and building, reaching out to people and making opportunity happen in spaces where the opportunity is not obvious. And I think it also speaks to the absolute necessity of having more role models, but accessible role models, people who can actually be connected with and discussed with. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I do like these mentoring sessions at events like San Diego Comic-Con for people who want to get into game development, because there's so many people who are interested, and I want to make sure they're talking with people who, can show them, basically say, you can do this. I did it. You can do it too. The other piece of it, though, of course, is representation in the games themselves. And that's actually more the focus that I have as a consultant. And I will say that I think that has been far more progressive than we've seen in the workplace. So we still have that issue, that the people who make games don't necessarily represent those who play them. So that needs to be fixed. But I do think representation in the games has, in my experience in the last 5 years in particular, has really gone a turn for the better. And if you really want to, focus it, I honestly would say ever since George Floyd's murder 2 years ago, the impact of that event on companies having to basically wake up. Now, there's many cases throughout history where they should have woken up. We can get into that, for sure. But I've seen, just in my experience, because I work with so many companies, especially with the larger AAA ones, they really took that as a wake-up call, and not just like, oh my gosh, we're scared of social media. And now it's like, this is the right thing to do. I'm not saying they're all there yet. They're not. But I'm saying that event did basically get it into their minds that this really does matter to people, and you really need to make an effort. So I'm encouraged. I'm not going to say it's certainly not fixed, but I'm definitely encouraged today more than I was 5 years ago.
All right. Anybody else on the current perception and how that has changed from when you were growing and seeing in the gaming industry or gaming space? I apologize.
Well, I come at this as a mom. So I have two boys who play a ton of video games. And when I was a kid, like Kate, it was very, very male dominated. And when my kids were in it, it felt male dominated. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until Scott Shaw asked me to do this panel that I was like, really? 45% of gamers are women?
Yeah.
But then it's something like 90% of game developers are men and 81% of those dudes are white. Mm-hmm. And we see all kinds of problems from that demographic. We can see it in AI really, really directly, how problematic that monoculture is. And so, I don't think it's, Kate is saying it's changed it so much better. I think that's, one of the things that really, has to change in Futures First Gaming is, really got the right idea about trying to bridge that gap between people who are playing and people who are developing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I totally have to agree with Kate, both Kates. We have two Kates here. At least I'm from a more younger generation. I used to play a lot when I was a kid in social groups, mostly with my brother. And sometimes it was really odd to be that girl or that only girl that is into tech and into gaming. And it shouldn't be this awkward space where women have to fight and create by themselves and actually take in that challenge and the initiative to actually push through. Along with game development, I'm a developer as well. And, that's a really strong statistic, and 98% of developers are men, and that 2% is for women. And that keeps going down along with if you're Latina, if you're American or any other entity. And it shouldn't be that battle for us to create that space. Along that, game development and gaming seems to be pretty much apart, but they unify in one very important aspect. When they are testing, they're enjoying these games and how the consumer behaves. So if we can actually merge those two channels into one and to actually really understand and fulfill those needs, I think it's a very powerful tool.
Do you have anything to say on the subject? Awesome. Awesome. It's okay. It's okay. It's cool. Because as we go on, and talking about, it seems like a theme line was talking about how, although 45% of women like play games, it kind of doesn't feel like that when you get to the industry, when you talk about the States. It doesn't at all, right? But you women are examples of people who are around the gaming space, who are adjacent to it, who care about the gaming space, who care about increasing representation, right? Whether it be in the game space or outside of the gaming space. So how do you feel that representation impacts when you're growing up, when you're forming for young girls, young boys who are playing games, and what that impact does of seeing more people who look like us in these spaces, how it can help them to maybe make sure that even though there is that 45%, maybe we have more than like 2% in tech?
I think it's Marian Wright Edelman that says you can't be what you can't see. And I think that that is something that I try to keep at the forefront of my work, at least, because people, if you don't see people that look like you, that come from similar backgrounds as you, that have overcome, similar obstacles as yourself, then it's hard for you to see yourself in that role. And for you to see that it's a possibility for you. So like also just like looking at possibility models. And I think that's something that I have strived to do with Aspiring Co, at least in like the media space, and just showing people that look all completely different, that have completely different backgrounds, and how they are still going after whatever it is that they want for themselves.
Anybody else have any other points?
I do. So I did a little research for the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media. And she talks a lot, they have a report that they released last year about online gaming and how it impacts masculinity. And it wasn't just masculinity, but it was also all the intersections, LGBTQIA plus characters are 0.3% of the characters in games, and people with disabilities are 0.1% of the characters, and older characters are almost non-existent. And then when you talk about what's happening in the streaming, like as the people are gaming, there's a ton of abuse happening along all these intersections in the chat stream and also from the streamers themselves. And so in terms of representation, like Jallery was talking about earlier, like being the woman in the space and having that feel weird. And I read another couple of articles where women kept saying, like, we just need a space where people can be nice. We just need a place where people can be civil. And I think that that's really important in representation too, is that people, and somebody else said it, I think it was Jallery and Kate, maybe there has to be a safe space for people to have their voices heard. And we don't have that right now.
Well, and I just to add to that, I mean, I would say there are some safe spaces, but unfortunately they went underground. And the reason they went underground is because of Gamergate, to be quite honest, because like I was running the IGDA during Gamergate, because I was a woman in a prominent position within the game industry. I was one of the several who were targeted by them, 2+ years of death threats and harassment and everything else online, basically the worst of the toxicity. And, it basically what we had to do in order to have these conversations with each other was to basically create tons of secret groups on Facebook and everywhere else. And so these are great communities, to be honest, but it's really hard to find them unless you know somebody who's in one of them. I'm not saying they're all underground. There's a lot of great communities out there, like Women in Games International and the Women in Games group also out of the UK called WIGI. There's a lot of great organizations there that I really encourage people to check out. But where the really kind of substantial conversations take place, like you were mentioning, they're kind of hidden, and it's really disappointing. It's unfortunate that they are.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that not only does it help like the next generation, but also too the people who are currently in this space too, in order to survive, in order to thrive. It really helps out having that support system. Anybody have a testament to where like having that other person in that space kind of helped them, whether or not it be in gaming, whether it be in real life, how having someone who understands your background was there to support you during a space where, like Jallery said, you're probably one of the few. Any experience?
Definitely. And I think also that it's like part of the importance of mentorship. So when we have the opportunities to make connections for people, to help with the sense of having a community behind you, I think that's really important also.
Mm-hmm.
Andrea, can we ask you that question?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Any space in which I felt like I had like somebody, the community. Yeah. It's funny. I would not be here if it wasn't for women in this space who appreciated me and cared for me and looked out for me. The reason how I got into esports was because a Black woman who was my professor, she put me out there and was like, "Hey, I like your Let's Play videos. You do esports. I know that you could do a casting job, right?" And she pushed me out there. And not only that, too, through her, I met several other women who were in the esports space in Atlanta who were very kind and helpful, who were doing casting opportunities, who were tournament operators, who were in charge of events. And they ended up helping me out because there are only but so few of us in this space. Without that community, I would not be here, because with them, I've had the encouragement, the career development, the mentorship, as Danae was talking about, that really guided me to a place. So when we talk about representation, this is something that actually, it impacts all of us, I'm sure, but it particular with me, I would not be here hosting in the esports space, in the gaming space in general. It's something that I wanted to make my career. Jalary, you talked about one of the few. It's hard to do that. So when you're one of the few, when you see other people in this space, when you have that camaraderie, you join together and you realize that, hey, I need to help you out and mentor you, and so that there can be more women in this space, so we can make it a safer space, and so we can bridge the gap for others. And I try to do that with some of the other women that I encounter in the space as well. And Jalary, you talk about like helping out kids as well. Like I'm sure as somebody who helps with kids and mentors things, there's a particular interest in making sure if there are any women who are in your stream camps to, help them out as well, because it can be quite hard, especially I teach game development as well. It can be quite hard to keep them encouraged and keep them on the right path, because they're excited and passionate, but there are ups and downs in the industry.
Yes, I totally have to agree. And I love that you told your story, Andrea. That's the importance of stories, because, you had a lot of women in support that were routing out for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to have someone routing out for you. And like Diane said, even in entrepreneurship, leaders like the panelists that are here today, in order to be in this position, you have to really have consistency and discipline and really do that extra effort to actually speak and reach people.
Yeah.
And us leaders, we're just making a road. That's how I tell my students, I'm just making a road for you, that when 2040 comes, that all this generation is going to be tired, and I'm going to start getting tired because I'm going to start getting my 40s. They're just getting started, and they're going to get started in the best moment. It's like turning on a candle and let everyone ignite. So you were ignited through that process, and that is beautiful. And I just believe that women need a more space, and along with women, anyone should be protected and have the ability to speak without fear in a community where you could be in danger and being really awkward, when it actually is a beautiful opportunity to grow as a society. It's just that, there's a lot of poor misinformation out there, and leaders like us and these types of events are the things that educate people and orientate in what are the right decisions to pass to take.
Because those spaces really help you grow and form and develop. And we say too, this industry is forming, developing, is getting, and hopefully as more things go on, as we see more women in our spaces, we end up growing to the point where, pretty soon, a couple generations from now, they don't have to go through some of the trials and tribulations that we're going through right now, and don't have to overcome as much. That's the whole point of growth and development. Let's talk a little bit about what do you feel, we talked a little bit about them, but any other ways that you feel like you can achieve better representation in women in games, and whether that be for development, context, sexualization, anything that can really help bridge that gap?
Make women 50% of all crowd scenes unless it is historically unlikely.
We love that. We love that, because we're already 45 was the number that we had, but I saw early in your chat 48%, and you know we're already 50% of the population, so that's going to go up. So making sure that it's the people behind it as well who are doing it.
Oops. I would also say that as I work with the core creative teams quite a bit, I often push them on some of the choices that they're making in terms of like the different characters, the NPCs, whoever else is in the narrative that they're using. The good thing about one good thing, at least from a user perspective, most games that I'm working on, especially the larger games, like franchise titles, they are like completely revamping their character creation. So you can basically be anyone, any pronouns. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing with some of the games that are going to be coming out later this year and next year in terms of the user choice. But then on the narrative side, on like the NPC side, they still have a ways to go, obviously. But I am encouraged that more companies are finding the courage to have women protagonists in a primary role, not just Laura Croft. But I do think that the recreation of Laura Croft, through which really, frankly, happened not only just because they decided to reboot the franchise, but also they hired, I mentioned her name before, Rihanna Pratchett, who's a remarkable writer, and she basically gave that character the depth that never existed before, and so not only with the physicality that they changed and made her look relatively more human in her proportions, but then, basically giving her a backstory and emotional depth and a lot of that really kind of brought the character to life. And I think that was a good example. Also, of course, in Horizon Zero Dawn, you've got a very prominent female character, and there's many others that have come along, and especially, of course, in the indie space, that's where I find the most encouragement, because they are willing to take the chances and take the risk. And I don't really think it's a risk. Basically, it's a matter of self-expression, and you see far more diversity of developers in the indie space, and because of that, you also see far more diverse narratives with a lot of underrepresented people in the primary role or exclusively in the game, which I think is super exciting. And so I think it's just, and I've seen the larger studios are starting to understand that and lean into that more. But yeah, it's still going to take time, but it is encouraging to me.
Where do you feel like, I apologize, hold on real quick. There you go. All right. How do you feel like we can better achieve a great representation of women in the gaming space? Valerie or Danae, do you have anything to add?
Yes, well, at least from my perspective as a game developer, that's more like my role here. Sometimes when I'm looking for assets and libraries as Unity, Unreal Engine, I just noticed that when I'm looking for characters even to develop, going through stages of educating the classes or even to publishing, like everything is related to, well, this masculine side of the game or the characters, the gameplay, the storytelling. And I just think that women have a good story to tell in other communities. So if we increase the development and the creation being more diverse, we're going to have better results because the players get one perspective of the page and the developers other. And if we can impact both sides and, gamers, we can impact different type of people. You don't necessarily have to be into technology. There's people who are doctors and they play video games, or adults or children. So, we can have a more broad impact in spreading a message. We actually include that in the gameplay as well.
Agreed. And I think just like telling people about like the career path and like what it looks like, and people having access to like being able to like name people that are doing the work that they want to do, that will help make it all the more real for them. And I think that once we start changing, you know, where kids are getting their inspiration from for like, well, kids or anyone, for whatever they want to be when they grow up, once we start changing that and kind of infiltrating that space, I think things will naturally kind of progress because people are going to want to make things that are more authentic to them.
Yes, and authenticity is important, but that's why you need to have them in spaces so the authenticity doesn't feel forced, right? Because we've seen several examples of forced attempts at authenticity. It doesn't necessarily work. Let's talk a little bit about any pet peeves that you might see in gaming, how women are represented, and something you would like to change about those pet peeves to kind of make it so that, hey, you're not doing that false representation. You actually have a accurate portrayal of women in gaming.
The clothes. Women are 4 times as likely to be wearing clothes that are not appropriate for the task at hand.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a great one. There was a game that I worked on that spoke to that very issue because it was a, fantasy game. And of course the women were wearing, armor where their midriff is exposed and their breasts are like very much exposed. And it's just ridiculous. And one was an archer and another was like carrying a sword or something. And I'm like, the way she's exposed is like, I assume she's a great sword master, because if she just moves that sword in one wrong way, she's going to hit her leg and just slash it open. I mean, because she's completely bare. But this company, they found out that they were getting a lot of players in the Middle East. And of course, for the Middle East, they have different standards. So we had to redo and revise the artwork for those characters. And the artists, I kind of walked through with them of the revisions that we made, and we made them look amazing. They looked so kick-ass and ready for battle. They were fully clothed, they were armored, and I was just, sort of. Then I go back to the team after they finished those. They said, "Yeah, those are the ones we'll use for the Middle East." I said, "So you're going to use those in the North American version too, right?" That's the idea. And they're like, "No, we're not going to do that." I said, "Well, how about just make them available for DLC? I mean, because I think there's a lot of people who would be really, find that really cool." And they're like, no, we know our demographic. They don't want that. And it's just horrible. It kind of speaks back to, the fact that, almost half of the players are women. It's like, maybe you would get more women players of your game if you actually had better representation in the game. So that kind of thing happens a lot. I think my biggest pet peeve beyond the clothing, which I think was a great one, is still the trope of the damsel in distress in some form or another. Even if it's a woman who is written to be strong and, and all of and independent and everything, but inevitably somewhere in the game's narrative, she needs help, and it has to be the man who comes and rescues her. And I'm really tired of that.
Yeah, Daisy, right? Daisy and Mario definitely didn't do anything, but hey, I need help from Bowser, and there you go. Mario series, I will say, is doing a little bit better in making Princess Peach at least a little bit more, but you're definitely right in that regard. Valerie, Zane, you have anything to say about your biggest pet peeve when you're gaming?
I think for me, I grew up playing video games, but at some point I lost interest. And I would venture to say that it probably has something to do with the lack of representation and like not seeing people that looked like, the clothing, people that were not super helpless, and, people that were more of like the hero in their own story, like main character energy. I don't feel like that was anything that was ever like applied to me, and that probably helped me lose interest in gaming more. Now that I'm like an adult, I'm able to get a little bit more into it. I like to play platform games. But yeah, I think mostly the clothing is like the biggest thing for me.
Valerie, also the clothing, right?
Yeah, the clothing is very, it just misconcepts for previous misconducts. So that, I think, makes the environment more hostile for women. The way they project them in the game as real life is completely different. And it's not a reality. So I obviously think the clothes have a lot of a big of effect. And like Diane said, representation. I probably, if I were a soldier, I wouldn't dress up probably that way. I'd probably have a cooler outfit. Give me some real guns that you would give to the male character, give me those assets and I'll give a good fight in the game. But, as long with the gameplay and other things. So I just think that clothing, perception, reality has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, a really big gap in reality, but slowly we're bridging that, I would say. A lot of it we talked about, like, I suppose the development side, right? And talking about how they do it. How do you feel like representation, and we touched a little bit about that, affects community? We talked about safe spaces, right? And about how sometimes being that one person in the space, you don't feel safe, right? How can that representation really help for young women? You might have girls who say that they game, but in actuality, I've had a lot of these conversations. They don't go on mics, right? They don't say anything while they're playing. They're used to feeling abuse, getting toxicity thrown their way. How does that representation not only affect like the development side, but also for these young women who are trying to play these games in peace?
Well, at least with my students, I do have a server, at least from our company, and we provide that safe space for students. And they're minors under 18, so they do need to be supervised and be guided by people. So I just think if more companies created more spaces for their users with control and supervision, that could really be fixed and be through with the rules. And once, I always think that educating people is the right way. If you want to be in our space, these are the rules, you have to behave. And, it is what it is in the end. We have to protect all users. So if people animate to do that, we can bring that back. Like Kate said, it existed once. Right now, there's more technology, more people going up front to speak. So, this should be brought back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know that toxicity is a huge issue that relates to this. That the industry is trying to address. There's several groups that have come together that are working across companies to deal with this. And of course, there's also mental health resources that have risen, like TakeThis.org and Safe in Our World, that focuses on mental health of streamers and gamers and game developers, because obviously that's a massive impact from all of this. The lack of representation, the feeling of loneliness, the feeling of stress that comes with all of that. And so I'm glad to see that there's more of these resources in place. But like Jallery mentioned, though, it is a problem where, we've got these communities, and unless you control it, like it's your own server and you've got it boxed off and set off from the world, but for a lot of the games people play, it's just not the case. So, and for a lot of these larger companies, it's a very asymmetrical problem, because the teams that are assigned to deal with all of the harassment and community safety are very small teams compared to the player base. As we're talking a team of maybe 20 or 30 people compared to, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million playing the game, and it's very asymmetrical. But what's encouraging, though, is that there are some tools coming online that have been over the last few years that are based on AI, where they can kind of pick up patterns of chat and interactions between different players, so that the AI can kind of automatically kind of put somebody in the timeout box until a human can go actually examine exactly what was going on. So I'm encouraged if there's more tools like that. It's not going to be perfect, but there's got to be a heck of a lot more work in that space, though, because it's really problematic right now.
Yeah, definitely very problematic. I'm excited to see that there are developments and there are steps in the right direction. But of course, as we know, there's still a lot more work left to go. We talked a little bit about gaming and about representation and seeing representation. What do you envision in a perfect world beyond, of course, Kate, you talked about this, Kate Cottle, you talked a little bit about like, hey, having 50% of women, not only in the gaming space, but also in the higher up space as well. Beyond that, what do you feel would be a perfect, ideal situation? What do you envision good representation looking like? What does that feel? What does that mean to you?
So the first thing is civility, right? Anybody should be able to get into the space and have an expectation of civility. And I don't know how, I don't know boots on the ground pragmatically how to do that. But that seems to me the biggest thing is why not knowing that you're not going to have to face an abuse if you want to play a game. And the other thing that I would like to see is, I would like to see people can do emotional health through video games. Like we have telehealth, Kate just talked about 2 things that were mental health oriented. When people are playing video games, could there be parts where there are strategy and there are emotional health problems, where people are asked to grapple with more than just the physicality of it, but like, what are the ethics of what you're doing? Or you've just killed this person. What's going to happen? You know, like, how is that going to make you feel? And I know that this is unlikely. I know that nobody's ever going to do this, but in my ideal pie in the sky, you know, every time somebody killed somebody, they'd have to go to a therapist like a policeman does when they discharge their weapon.
Yeah, I think for me in a perfect situation, I mean, one of the things I want to see more developers do, and I think that it's definitely a better trend over the last several years, is that if you're going to represent a character of any kind, you know, whatever their background is, you have to have a direct collaboration. If the character is not being written by someone of that particular demographic, then you absolutely need to have somebody, sensitivity reader, consultant, whoever, come in and basically help you navigate that space. And I've seen some really good examples of that in the recent years. Like I was really fortunate to be able to work on the game Never Alone, which was about this small Inuit girl from northern Canada. And the entire game represents the Inuit culture and their language and everything about their spirituality. But the entire game was done in a direct collaboration with the tribal group there in Canada. And so the developers, who were mainly based in Seattle in the US, they basically saw their job to be stewards from a technology standpoint. We're implementing the technology, but we're telling their story. And they're the ones who are approving everything that is represented in this game. And I thought the end result was quite good. And I still point to that as a good example. That's how you do it. And I'm hoping to see, you know, on questions of representation, not only doing that as a practice where you're reaching out, but also actually reaching out and doing it because there are so many stories to be told and so many cultures that have never been represented in the game. Yes. And while we are seeing that in the indie space, I would love to see more and more larger companies, you know, because they just because they get the eyes on them more. I want to see them more. And that's one of the things in my work I push them to do is like, have you ever thought about that culture or this culture? Yeah. You know, because why do you have to use like Greek mythology again or Norse mythology? It's been done 1,000 times. Nobody cares anymore. World War II
shooters. Like, yeah. Valerie, it looked like you were going to say anything about the subject.
Oh, I was just enjoying the moment, but thanks for the opportunity. I do believe that, both Kates are right. You know, part of the mental health issues is actually to address them through games. And I do believe that playing is a very fun activity. And if we address other things along, we can impact human behavior and set those expectations to people. So I completely agree. And as along with Kate, bringing other cultures along, and each culture has their own distinguished behavior, part of being cultural. So if we set those boundaries as well on both sides, I think we make a good impact.
All right, okay. And Danae, anything else to say on the subject?
Not really. I was just kind of thinking, my brain kind of went down a little rabbit hole of like, if we started having women that were like representing, like that actually like represented us in the way we wanted to be represented, how might that change the way that they're treated, like in how players are treated? If you see everyone as like human and equal and, you know, powerful, I wonder if that would change some of the narrative and some of the bullying that people have to go through.
Yes, that is very true, because not only are there unrealistic expectations for women, but there are also unrealistic expectations for men, hyper men, manly men who are doing all this. And honestly, when you're growing up, you're a sponge. You're trying to learn, trying to grow, and seeing only one static representation is not good for you. You need more, and that's why representation matters. Any parting words from any of you all before we wrap this thing on up?
I just want to say one thing, and that So sometimes we think that the stories of men are all the stories that we've ever had, right? You know, the great heroes, the Greek, you just said the Greek myths, the Norse myths. Before the stories of men, we had goddesses, right? And so when you're looking at those great hero myths, a lot of times when they're defeating dragons or lions or huge snakes, that's propaganda for the past matriarchy being defeated by this current patriarchy in those legends. And so Jallery was just talking about other cultures. Danae talked about other cultures. Yeah, right? We've got a whole, like, we've got so many goddesses that we could look at. And there's also characters like, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Bakarjan Kone, who's an African hero in the 1600s. And he became a great hero, and then he lost everything and he had to regain it. And so, like, talking about a video game where people had to do something emotional health, well, how do they handle failure?
Yeah.
So that's it.
And that's a theme that I feel like it's not touched on in enough media in general. It's just like, hey, you get the success. No, failure is an important part of success. So I appreciate that.
The only thing that I would like to add, just in addition to all the other great stuff that's been said here, is just basically, even though we've kind of painted a picture that representation needs to be better, both in the workplace side especially, but also in the games. But I really encourage people to not be discouraged because of that. There is a place for you in this industry, honestly. I mean, the industry is constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and it's happening because there's more representation coming into this industry, and the technology keeps evolving. So it's like, this is still a space for anybody to come in from anywhere and shake things up. And so I encourage people to not be discouraged at all. And if you need to find a mentor, you know, I know many people are introverted, like myself. I'm faking extroversion right now. You know, introversion and imposter syndrome, we need to deal with that and overcome it. You know, and finding a mentor can be a great way to do that, because you get someone who can kind of reflect you can reflect your skill set with them, and they can encourage you and kind of help propel you forward. And so, you know, basically just keep your eye, if this is something that you want to do, then just do it. Don't let this discourage you.
I love that. Keep on going. It's okay. It can be a little discouraging, but having that inner strength, it helps. Jallery?
Yes, I'd like to say an open invitation for the people who are listening that, yes, do not get discouraged. You know, there's great people in this panel. At least for me, feel free to reach out if any orientation, any consulting I could do on my end. I really like to inspire people into actually getting comfortable, I have that nutshell, and actually trying to expose themselves and become someone. These are heroes, the people who are speaking in this panel as well. So I'm really excited to actually meet other women. That motivates me as well. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to keep going because we got a lot of weight on our shoulders. Like I said, we're making a path for those who are coming behind us. And all the people who are listening here are coming before and behind us. So I like to inspire more people to see this event as, let's keep uniting, keep expanding and making this space better. Like Kate said, the industry is changing, so we need more people to make this change. The more noise we make, the more ground we will shake. So I'm really excited and grateful for being in this event.
I like that. And with a little bit of a rhyme too. The more noise we make, the more ground we could shake. I like that, a bar. All right. Danae?
I just want to say, if there's something that you want to see it in the world and you don't see it, don't be afraid to go out there and make it for yourself.
Yes.
And you will not be the only one, and you'll find other people on that journey that will support and uplift you, and you'll find your own sense of community. So I think just like really having the fortitude to just push through and to create the things you want to see in the world, because it's hard, but it's doable. That's how everything gets started. So be encouraged, and you're not by yourself.
Yeah, when there's no way, you make a way. All right. I love that. And it's a great way to wrap this up. Again, thank you so much for all the participants in the panel. Kate Edwards, Danae Edmonds, Kate Cottle, and Jallery Lantigua. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys' insight, and you guys have a wonderful day.